What's up, everybody? Welcome to ClearTalk. So, in this video today, I thought I would talk about the G7 in lieu of the meeting that we previously had a few days ago, and that Trump just sort of left early from because of the whole issue around Israel and Iran and them having some late night kind of stuff. Anyways, what I want to do is kind of just let's have a little educational video here. Talk about the G7, figure out what it is, discuss it. What's the how it started, what's the purpose of it, the relevance of it. It other groups that are kind of alternatives to it. Anyway, so that's what we're going to do here in this video, and then we're going to talk about how at the end kind of the confidence that the other countries have in the United States, specifically right now, in dealing with world matters or whatever, international matters. So, thank you for joining me here. If you are new, welcome very much. And you can check out any part of JMD Nation. It's all on the screen here. If you are returning, you're freaking awesome. Welcome back. And yeah, this is YouTube. You know what to do. So do the damn thing. All right. Let's swap over here. So this is from the Council of Foreign Relations. What does the G7 do? All right, it's a group of seven that have been a forum to coordinate global policies for 50 years. But of course, experts are increasingly questioning the group's relevance. So, what is it? The G7 is an informal bloc of industrialized democracies: the United States, Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, and the United Kingdom. They meet annually to discuss issues such as global economic governance, international security, and most recently, artificial intelligence. Um, the G7 previously was the G8 because it included Russia, and that's one big thing that at the G7 even this year, Trump makes a big deal about. That we should have never had that happen. We should have let Russia go. We should have kept them in here. If we would have done that, then we wouldn't have had a war. If I'd have been president, we wouldn't have had a war. Nevertheless, that he's president now and we fucking have a war going on. But whatever. Um, Here we are. G7 futures recently been challenged by tensions with Russia, previously a member from 1998 to 2014 when it was suspended for annexing Ukraine's Crimea region, and increasingly China. The international disagreement over trade and climate policies have further tested the group's reliance. So they've had issues and disagreements or concerns coordinating sanctions on Russia over its war and the launch of global infrastructure investment program by the China's Belt and Road Initiative. And this year's meeting in Canada was the 15th anniversary summit. So why was the G7 formed and how does it work? The United States, France, Italy, Japan, and UK and West Germany formed a group of six in 1975 to promote a venue for non-communist powers to address pressing economic concerns, which included inflation and recession sparked by OPEC, oil embargoes. Canada joined the following year, and the Cold War policies invariably entered the group's agenda. The European Union has participated fully in the G7 since 1981 as a non-enumerated member, and it is represented by the presidents of the European Council, which comprise EU member states leaders in the European Commission and EU's executive body. All right. There's no formal criteria for membership, but all participants are wealthy democracies. And in 2024, the combined gross GDP of the G7 nations, not including the EU, were nearly 57 trillion, or about 29% of the global economy. So basically, these, and what has become here recently an issue, as far as like concerning whether or not the G7 really has that much, or the relevance of it, is that because of other nations that have moved up over the years since its big, since its start, have moved up in the economies. Their economies have grown and stuff, and they've become larger and larger in the total domestic uh, productivity of the economy, global economy. That they have steadily lowered, the reduction of shares in the global economy has declined with the G7. So it's like if you're not going to, it's kind of like if you're not going to include and bring in more members, um, are you just how relevant really are you? That's kind of the idea I think there. What happened with Russia? Russia formally joined the group in 1998, making it the G8. U.S. President Bill Clinton thought that admitting Russia would lead to the country international prestige and encourage its first post-Soviet leader, which was Yeltsin, to hew more closely to the West, trying to kind of pull them in, influence or whatnot. Um, Clinton also believed that the membership would help mollify Russia as the NATO security alliance opened its doors to former Soviet satellites in the Eastern Europe. But of course, his decision did draw some pushback. Finance ministers, in particular, were weary of coordinating economic policies with Russia, which had relatively small economy and large public debt. But then there was even more backsliding and more like issues when authoritarianism kind of fell into Russia with Vladimir Putin, uh, and then of course just further division with uh, then trying Moscow and annexing the Crimean region in 2014, which eventually ultimately resulted in indefinite suspension from the group. Uh, and then there's been further friction between the G7 and Russia with their support for the Assad regime in Syria and stuff like that, that now has been taken over, um, and so forth. The one big, uh, one other thing is like if you, of course, you've probably heard of the Paris Climate Agreement. That was established with the G7, which, we know that back in 2017, Trump refused to commit to it, and hinted at trying to withdraw from the deal, uh, which he, I think, to some degree did in his first term. Then Biden kind of, I think, signed or came back into it. Um, but then, of course, here recently, when Trump took back over, he then um, separated ourselves again from it, which is causing more internal friction and stuff within the group, the G7 group. And the other issue with the G7 is the alternatives to the G7, which is currently the G20, which is a group of, currently 19 finance ministers and central bank governors across 19 world's largest countries. All right, this is and then the 20 is a collective grouping, a union of the EU and the AU, which is the African Union. Those are kind of uh, collective members, but they're not a single country. So there's 19 single countries, and then a collective union that includes the EU and the AU, which makes up the 20th member. And these include Brazil, China, India, Mexico, South Africa, and let me see here. What was the other groups? Argentina, Australia, Brazil, Canada, China, France, Germany, India, Indonesia, Italy, Japan, Mexico, Russia, Saudi Arabia, South Africa, South Korea, Turkey, and the United Kingdom and the United States. And Spain has been invited. So that's the G20. And they the question for the G7 and experts have for the G7 is that just how relevant they are, how much that they actually control, because like I said, the collection of the G7 is only like 29-30% of GDP in the total world economy, where on the other hand the G20 comprises together, I think, around 70%. Yeah, 70. Okay. Yeah, 85% of the global economic output, 75% of global exports, and hold 80% of the world's population. So it's a much broader group that uh, seems to have would seemingly have more ability to react and deal with economic issues globally, in trying to identify things or decide things that happen. Like for instance, the G20 were the big contributors to the 2008 recession, as far as like trying to bring us out of that recession. The decisions and stuff that were made globally, um, and although there is some pushback on that for the COVID-19, because some people don't think that they made the best decisions there, but I mean, not every group can be perfect, I guess. But the G7, like I said, it's a global group of just seven countries that basically are trying to look and discuss. They come and discuss economic uh, governance and stuff. It's securities of everybody, stuff like that. So the most recent thing that has caused strain within the G7, though, is the Trump tariffs, and trying to have global, the global or the trade, agreements between our countries. All of these, the other six members were hit by the Trump tariffs, especially initially, and there's been conflict there. We were supposed to work together. It's kind of the whole kind of backlash between about the Trump tariffs to begin with. Was why were countries that we are consider allies and we work with and we've been trading with and we have good trading relations with, why are we making such issues with them? Why would Trump make that big a deal about that, when are they collectively understand and most agree that the biggest threat economically, as far as any kind of trading, like conditions that are questionable or like aren't in the best, like, or unfair practices, is with China. I mean, that's China has had some unfair trading things. I mean, that is it is it is a concern, and the reason why the Trump tariffs in his first term against China solely, were met with relatively mixed and, for the most part, even acceptable, uh, agreements, I guess you could say. But uh, with that and other things that he has done here recently, though, um, we there's been more and more unconfidence, lack of confidence in Trump, actually, like, handling certain global issues. And we have some numbers here and stuff relative to these countries, other members of the G7, in the video here that CNN is going to talk about.
What are you learning about what the people of these countries think about Donald Trump and whether he is with or against them?
Yeah, I think that this title slide says it all, why Trump faces a tough room at the G.
Now, this is before the G7. Okay, this is when this was done. So that's so they're talking about why he's going to be facing a tough situation going into this group, because of the polling research done, Pew Research stuff done in confidence of these countries.
That is because the countries outside the U.S. who are part of the G7, those folks, not big fans of Donald Trump. Not big fans at all. No confidence Trump will do the right thing when it comes to world affairs. Look at this. All these numbers are at least at 60% or above. You could start off here at the bottom. Japan 61, the UK 62. You go to that next row, Italy 68. We're getting higher and higher and higher. Canada 77. And finally, France 78%. And Germany, 81% of Germans have no confidence that Donald Trump will do the right thing when it comes to world affairs. We're looking at a supermajority in all 6 of these G7 countries besides the U.S. They do not like Donald Trump. They have no confidence in him to do the right thing when it comes to world affairs. And I think that will inform some of the leaders there in those countries going into this G7 summit with Donald Trump. And again, he's just going to face a tough room because those folks in those countries, they don't really like Donald Trump.
And this is reflective mostly because of, like I said, the trade tariff issues that he, previously inflicted on everybody, although that has been put on pause for, for a little while, but still it's creating instability, and whether or not that will just be dropped or if it's going to come back or whatever the case. And then, of course, issues now that we know about with, stuff going on in the Middle East and the confidence and the lack. These are all countries that are starting to really have issues with Israel and how they're conducting things, and then our, potential involvement and stuff, which is, up and down, and whether or not, we will get involved. And many of these countries have pushed back and have, tried to suggest de-escalation because they don't want things to continue to go the way they're going. I mean, these type of things is what's causing this lack of confidence because Trump is just so sporadic, and you just never know what he's really going to do at any moment. And, while I think he kind of likes that to some degree, it still doesn't instill any kind of confidence and stability. And ultimately, the decisions that are being made continue to show that, inability to have confidence in him. So,
how much has this changed since Trump was elected?
Yeah, this is, I think, you see all these numbers here and you go, okay, has this always been the case that there's been such low confidence in the U.S. leader? Take a look here. Okay, no confidence that the U.S. president will do the right thing when it comes to world affairs. We're going to look at a median of those 6 countries that we just saw on the other side. You see it here. In 2025, 73%. The median in those countries have no confidence that Donald Trump will do the right thing when it comes to world affairs. With Joe Biden, look how much lower that number was. It was basically 50-50 at 51%. So the percentage of those G7 countries that have no confidence that Donald Trump will do the right thing has gone completely through the roof. We're talking about a 22-point jump in just a year's.
And to think about that, that's the last year of Biden. That's the last year of Biden when, like, everybody had grown like more and more and, had less and less confidence in anything Biden was doing. All right. That's the last year. And he was still 20 points less than Trump is in his first year right now. I mean, when we're talking about, sleepy Biden, okay, mental cognition dropping, everything. I mean, 51%. I mean, that's completely warranted. Matter of fact, it probably should have been even a little bit higher than that. I ain't gonna lie. But still, this also reflects not only on just the individuals, but the administrations, the people around them. So even though Biden personally, they probably, if he had full power, in all decisions, that probably would be a little bit higher. But the idea was that the people around him, they had a little bit more confidence in them probably than even Biden as far as handling things. Still, 51%, not great, but here, Trump, 73%. And this includes not just Trump, but his administration. Although, in difference to Biden, Trump probably has a little bit more influence in decision makings than Biden probably did. But he's increasingly influenced by some of the worst people in his administration, along with people like Netanyahu and stuff like that when it comes to those type of issues. But just goes to show that even in the worst case, I wouldn't even doubt that the 51% of Biden was probably one of the highest in recent years itself. But now we have 73% with Trump.
Time, rough room, tough room for Donald Trump.
Tough room, even with one of our closest allies, both by land and by culture, Canada. Do they want even a deal with Trump?
Yeah, this to me is the number that kind of says it all, right? We're talking about allies of the United States here. No ally has been closer to us over the years than Canada has been, but Canadians are reducing reliance on the U.S. as a trade partner. Look at this. 91%
this is
say
crazy.
that yes, that they in fact, that Canadians should in fact reduce reliance on the U.S. as a trade partner. You never see numbers that high.
Now, his source here is, I don't know who Angus Reid is, but this is February of 2025. And that's like, I want to say that's even before. Well, no, I mean, I guess that was when all of the rhetoric about the 51st state and stuff. So that's, that might have come down since then. Although I don't know, there's still some pretty hardcore, like angst towards the United States, particularly because of Trump. So I'm not sure that number really has come down that much, but I just did want to note that this isn't February, so there is a possibility that this might have dropped a little bit. It could also have went up. So, I don't know.
I'm laughing because it's just unprecedented compared to just 9% who disagree. 9%, that's about the percentage of Americans who believe we faked the moon landing. When you're in this territory, you know that we're in a lot of trouble.
And I'm not going to lie, the faking the moon thing, I a little bit, am a part of that 9%. I mean, I question it. I'm not for certain, but I'm also not for certain that we did. It's kind of like, did we? I don't know. Maybe not. I don't know. The relevance of it at this point maybe doesn't matter, but I used to be pretty hardcore in thinking that we didn't, but now it's kind of like, whatever. We did or we didn't. It doesn't really matter. But I mean, it to some degree it kind of would, especially if we actually didn't. But I'm agnostic in that, just for fun. Anyways, all right. But yeah, this is the growing the point in me talking about this, outside of kind of just learning, what the G7 was, and or discussing what they are, the relevance of them, which, like I said, seems to be more and more becoming a little less effective, especially since there seems to be less confidence in even us. There's been conflict happening. To what relevance they really matter, I mean, maybe not really, but it's what these countries do. They join together, make alliances to discuss different things, and good or bad or whatever. I don't know. I mean, to some degree, any nation's talking and having some sort of discussions about things like that is probably good to some degree. So I mean, there is some relevance. The relevance might be waning at this point, but the biggest concern also here, especially for this current moment, is that as much as we hear from constantly hearing from Trump and the administration about how people just love what we're doing, the world loves us, we are revered again, we are people have confidence in us, they trust us, and we're back on the international scale stage as loved and respected and all this kind of stuff. And where before, when Biden, that sleepy ass Biden, I mean, we were just, everybody hated us and they thought we were just ridiculous and blah 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 blah. The numbers don't seem to show that. The numbers just don't seem to show that. While I would agree to some degree, there was probably some question, especially just relative to like Biden's cognitive decline and the concern in his health, um, not necessarily his ability to uh, lead, maybe, or make any kind of decisions. I still think he had, maybe even now still has the ability to do so. Um, he's just slow. But Trump's actual decision making and the way he looks at things and the way in the reactions and actions that he makes, comments that he makes, the rhetoric, the just back and forth, and seems like from one moment to the next he's changed in his mind and blah blah blah. I mean, it's just chaotic. That kind of stuff is causes instability in relationships between countries. Even some of the biggest allies that we have, it causes ripples and discomfort, reduces the confidence that they have. Anytime you know mess with trust in any kind of way, you lose confidence. I mean, that's relationship 101, right? Um, and that same thing goes with country to country and alliances that we have. So no, when they say that we are, loved and respected, and everybody is get along with us, everybody wants to do deals with us, everybody wants to do this, because the United States is great and blah blah blah, and I'm great and I'm the deal maker. Everybody loves us. It's not true. It's just not true. We have lost respect. We have lost gain. We have lost our influence, our good influence on the international stage, economically, market wise, whatever. Like, we've just, his administration has just caused more chaos and more instability. And that's just not what you really want. So, let me know what you think in the comments. And yeah, until next time, peace. ClearTalk, I'm out.